We also, however, also hear other voices, and I must say that I detect a mood, let's say, in the House Republican caucus, which is to somehow use a tragic event of this type, which has really, I don't think, very much political context. It's mostly a question of mental illness, trying to use such an event perhaps as the beginning of a pretext to deny citizens in this country access to their elected representatives, especially in the House of Representatives. And I'm thinking above all of the magnificent display of democratic expression, which we've seen all year in the form of the town hall meetings conducted by people in both parties, which I think the interventions, the discussions in these town hall meetings have gone very far towards clarifying vital issues. And I think it would be doubling or tripling the current tragedy to try to exploit such an event to try to limit the institution of these town hall meetings. I would also put it in perspective. I guess the one that I thought of was the shooting in Tucson, Arizona, back in 2011 at the beginning of the year. And this was, of course, something which in terms of victims was more tragic. This was, I think, an event which is typical of what some of the best of American democracy. This was Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords in Tucson, Arizona, who held a meeting. It was called Congress on Your Corner, something that she did. Not only was she eager to have town meetings, she was willing to take herself and parts of her staff to a shopping mall and invite all comers to come up to her and discuss and talk and be there. Right? This, I think, is exemplary. And unfortunately, according to the verdicts now in the legal system, Jared Lee Lochner showed up with a pistol and shot not only Congresswoman Giffords, right, seriously wounding her and leaving her with very serious long-term problems, but there were also other victims, in particular a chief judge, the chief judge of the United States Federal District Court in Arizona, John Roll, was slain on the spot. A homemaker from Tucson was killed. A retired construction worker was killed. The community outreach director for Congresswoman Giffords, a kind of a staff member, was killed. A 10-year-old girl also killed. A retired secretary killed. So this was 6 people killed, and Congresswoman Giffords forced, because of the disability sustained, to retire from Congress, to resign her seat. And we hope that at various points she'll be able to reassert her political career. I would point out that on that occasion, the majority in the House of Representatives saw fit to do basically nothing. And again, I think the relevant provision that would be important in this context is quite simply the idea that people who are manifestly mentally disturbed, mentally ill, non-compos mentis, that these people should not have access to firearms, and that is the principal political lesson that ought to be drawn. And I think that probably applies in this case too, depending on what is found. Now, the alleged shooter today, James T. Hodgkinson, is now portrayed, especially on right-wing media, especially by Rush Limbaugh. That was the one I was able to sample.
Newt Gingrich, too.
Newt Gingrich also. Well, they say, well, this is a typical leftist. This is a leftist hater. This is somebody who worked for the Bernie Sanders campaign. I'm looking at the Atlantic Monthly website here, and here's this guy Hodgkinson demonstrating tax the rich, like Congress did for 70 years till Reagan's trickle down. We need 20 brackets, 20 million. The idea is that this is a typical leftist. As Limbaugh said today, hate is at home on the left, and they're the ones. And I would say that there should be no attempt to politicize this, because it's not, again, not primarily a political event. but a mental health event, a failure of the mental health system.
CNN's headline is Newt Gingrich responded to the shooting at GOP baseball practice, saying it was part of a pattern on the left. I think this is just not the right thing to do.
It's absurd. Mm-hmm. It's absurd. He should shut up. Newt should shut up. And I'm not the first one to say that in his long and valuable career. Hodgkinson is psychotic, in my view, and not typical of the Bernie Sanders campaign or anything of the sort. That's a political exploitation which really should be condemned. I would put this in the category perhaps of the Virginia Tech shootings. Now, those are obscure, right? Those are full of contradictions. But there was, at least in the publicly accepted version, a gunman by the name of Cho who opened fire on a university campus with no political overtone that could be seen. And I think that is closer to the truth of what we've just had. We'll have more about this as time goes on. And I hope that these Republican voices will resist the temptation to try to cash in on this politically, because it's wrong for the country and it won't work either. Right? That's maybe the more effective consideration.
There was only a handful of final candidates. They're bound to be supporting somebody. So it's so silly to exploit it. Half the population was for Hillary and half was for Trump. So if there's a crazy person out shooting, they're going to fall into some category, and then they're going to use it to exploit it.
Certainly. And, if people are politicized, everybody chooses sides. Mm-hmm. So you certainly can't blame this on Bernie Sanders. My heavens. Bernie is about as far away from violence.
Meaning it's not like he was part of some fringe niche thing in a foreign country, some terrorist group with only 20 members, and he was planning this for me. Being a Bernie supporter is like
a considerable number, almost half of the Democratic Party, for whatever that's worth, right?
Right.
The other thing is for Newt Gingrich to start saying this is typical of leftists. I don't know. I can't seem to forget the veterans coordinator for the state of New Hampshire for the Trump campaign, who called for the public capital execution of Hillary Clinton. And I think the argument could probably end there. So again, Newt Gingrich would be well advised to keep silent and not try to inflame these tragic situations. But now let's roll on to the broad objectivity of politics, right? Out from the world of these various kinds of speculation with more or less bad faith behind them. Again, the bottom line on this stuff is, if you're politically active, stay politically active. If you were planning